Grab a cup of coffee and start your day with Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life features stories to inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Visit cyacyl.com.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Do you go through life basing your self-worth on external possessions or accomplishments? The biggest home, most expensive car, beautiful spouse, brightest child, or academic degree? While these items may bring brief satisfaction, soon the hunger for more returns. According to today's guest, Dr. Rajiv Juneja, you can avoid this senseless and exhausting pursuit by reconnecting with the spiritual being that has lived inside you since birth. Dr. Raj describes strategies and practices for mastering your emotions and leaving the comfort zone that hinders your growth. He teaches that you're more than the limited creature you may perceive and that you can follow a different story than the often negative narrative that's been written from childhood. Dr. Raj practices adult psychiatry, addiction psychiatry, and integrative psychiatry, and is an individual and family therapist. He's author of the new book, You're More Than That, A Guide to Embracing the Spiritual Being Within and Becoming Fully Human. Welcome, Dr. Raj. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Doctor, so many people today, they're trying to fill voids with external accomplishments and acquisitions. And where do these holes that we try to fill come from? And what's the impact of this materialism?
I think fundamentally where they come from is what we have been conditioned to believe. If you think about it, the last 100, 200 years, age of industrialization, it very much became about keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. And, this is what infiltrated our culture. What kind of car do you drive? What do you, how much money do you make? And so instead of, who are you as a person when we meet somebody, usually what do people ask? What do you do for a living? What's your job? And then, of course, they get very homed in and focused on these external realities. So now we're raising children, and this is what they start believing. Oh, it's about these external things. But of course, and I know this personally, in the sense of, I thought getting a medical degree was going to give me that sense of self-worth. And I remember this just like yesterday. It was at Lincoln Center Hall, graduation day, sunny day, beautiful, cap and gown, everybody's there. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't feel any different. I said, what is going on here? This is supposed to do it. And that was really the beginning of understanding that, self-worth cannot come from the outside. In fact, it's something that has always been there. We're born with it.
Is that where the title of your book, You Are More Than That, came from?
That's exactly correct, yes, because, you are more than that in the sense of people get very caught up in labels and caught up in their job titles, caught up in all of these externalized realities. But we are so much more than that, and not just in the human front. So, I think of the word human being. We're not just human and we're not just beings. We're human beings. And, as the old verbiage goes, we're spiritual beings having this human experience. But where I took that a step further is really saying, what? Yes, I have these challenges. We have problems in our human life. But it has nothing to do with that spiritual being that is within, that we are essentially, being expressed as, that I am whole. I have always been whole. And so that's where that title came is, in fact, I'll share something. Before that title, You Are More Than That, it was I Am More Than That. And then I realized that, no, this is, when it came to deciding the title for the book, this is the message I wanted to send people, that they are more than they believe they are.
Doctor, what are the fundamentals of self-awareness and why is it so important?
Without self-awareness, what we're fundamentally doing is we are really living a program, living a conditioned program that we have inherited from our, environment, from our nuclear families, our parents and so forth, our caregivers. Now, this is not to suggest that we got to blame our parents or blame those significant people in our lives. It's not about blame, but it's about understanding. Understanding what is my story. I was born personally in India, and so I moved here when I was 5 years old. And one of the initial things I remember my father would tell me is become someone. And what he was meaning by that is get an education, do good for yourself. Don't struggle. Because neither one of my parents went to college, and it was a difficult time back when they moved here from India. But I'll tell you how I heard that was, I am an empty glass. I have to fill something of value in this glass. And that's where the whole drive for the medical degree came from. I said, if I put that in the glass, I got to be worthy. It has to result in me feeling more worthy. But of course, it didn't, not in a sustainable kind of way. Yes, I was happy to achieve that. But without that self-awareness, going back to your question, without asking myself, what was my story? Who am I? And really building that map. What beliefs came in when I was, growing up? Well, how did I see myself? How did I perceive myself? How did others perceive me? How did that impact me? These are all questions, but fundamentally, the question of why. Why do I have problems in relationships? What are some of my repetitive self-sabotage patterns? What are my themes? And that all goes back to our story.
The comment that you said your parents had made to become someone, that's a very common comment. I mean, I think I've heard that most of my life growing up. It's just expected. You go on to college and you get a wonderful job and you become someone.
Or make something of yourself. Right?
Oh, that's
People
another
say
one.
that.
Yeah, because you're nothing to begin with, obviously.
See, but that's the message that the child hears.
Right.
So we all have to go back and look for where in the story did I maybe take something in? Where in the story did I take in, I can't do that, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not good looking enough, and these fundamental beliefs that become part of the fabric of who we are until we realize, wow, I am more than that. No, that's not who I am. I am the spiritual being having this experience. I am not my story. Right? Because again, going back to my own experience, I sometimes think, who would I be if I grew up in India?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm probably pretty different.
Well, doctor, we have all of these beliefs that are so ingrained in us, as you said, and I mean, they really are a part of who we are. And let's say we come to realize that we are more than that, but now what? This is what we know. How do we make that shift? Yeah, so I'd say first of all, we have to identify, so it goes back to that idea of self-awareness. It all starts there, let me put it that way. And so first I have to become aware of how am I even interacting with the environment. And what I mean by that is how am I interacting with my home family? How am I interacting with my work family? We spend a lot of time at work, right? So essentially, how am I reactive or am I responsive? That's step number one. We have to ask ourselves and identify where are my buttons? What pushes, what triggers me? And I identified and came up with a very powerful and a very simple tool to become clear on that, or to help us understand that. And that is when one finds themselves upset, when somebody finds themselves maybe anxious, or maybe they find themselves feeling sad, to ask themselves, am I in reaction? Very simple question. Am I in reaction right now? And you'll get a yes or a no, right? But right away, now I have a chance to stop that reaction and say, okay, let me take a step back. What happened here, right? What actually got triggered in me? So that's where the fundamental of self-awareness starts, is I have to understand how am I interacting with the environment around me. Now, what happens then is shortly thereafter, what you'll do is you'll start catching yourself. And for the listeners, you'll start catching yourself in reaction. But now you have a chance to stop and say, let me take a step back. And then soon what will happen is you'll catch yourself quicker and quicker and quicker to the point where now you'll catch yourself before you react. And I wasn't born with this skill. I learned it. So I said, what, if I can learn it, other people can learn it. Listening to you, I think I operate most of my life in a reactive state. I mean, would you say that that's a true statement? Are we mostly operating from that point, that reactive state?
I'd say many people are very much, many people really function out of that reactive state instead. And think about it, as we're getting wiser and a bit, as we're, getting older, what do? We say, okay, I need to take a step back and really think about what's happening here, right? Versus being reactive to it. So, yes, I would say that's an accurate statement.
And why is it so harmful to continually exist in a reactive state?
Well, because number one, I'll tell you, from a mind, body, spirit perspective, it's the vibration. We're bathing ourselves in that reactive vibration of energy. Fundamentally, and I don't want to get too far down the road of quantum physics, but, we are fundamentally energy. We're literally light energy particles manifesting as elements and manifesting in this human body. So if I'm having negative reactive thoughts, that vibration now is going to permeate my entire body. This is where the idea of somatization, or symptoms that show up in our body. So say somebody's very, anxious about something and they get a rash on their body. So there's a direct, and we're at this point now, I think, in medicine in 2013, we know that there's clearly a link between what happens in the mind and what happens in the body. So that's why it's so fundamentally important to be able to step out of that reactive place and understand really what are my buttons. Now, let's take it a step further. Those buttons then will identify where our wounds exist, where our sensitivities exist. And now I have a chance to go and look at those places and understand those places and heal those places.
Doctor, you do a lot of work with addiction patients, and the wounds and the things that you're just referring to, are those a lot of triggers or things that lead to addictions?
I think that's an absolutely accurate statement, because, there's three main reasons one will use substances, and one of them primarily is self-medication. So somebody's feeling depressed and they start drinking. Initially, they feel a little bit better. Or say they start using illicit substance, cocaine, or pain medications. This is a big problem right now. I mean, there's a host of different illicit substances, but what it does is it buries that part of them. It puts away that part of them feeling bad or feeling anxious or feeling scared. But of course, it does nothing for the solution. Because, when we have a problem, we got to find the solution. We have to get to the root cause. And that, again, goes back to understanding, who am I? How did I get here? What pushes my buttons? How am I interacting with the environment? And then it starts that process of self-awareness.
And doctor, when we're talking about addiction, we're not just meaning drugs or alcohol. It can be food or shopping or gambling or anything that someone becomes obsessive about, correct?
That's correct. So let me say a couple of things about that, because it's important. In the field of psychiatry and addiction medicine, there are those things that have been studied, and we have research to support that, yes, these things are real problems. And then there are those things that do not have the research behind them yet. And so the ones that show up kind of in the diagnostic books, or that have been identified as problems, historically you had to have a substance involved. Marijuana, alcohol, cocaine. There had to be something that the person was taking in, and there's a lot of research behind that, okay? Then there became things like, think about gambling, right? There's no substance. You're not taking in anything. Or think about internet disorder, or the internet addiction. There's no substance, but we shortly there realized that, you can get into really addictive behaviors, and this can be a big problem. Even down to the point of being addicted to dysfunctional relationships, being addicted to the frustration. It becomes such the comfort zone for the person, that then they go and recreate this over and over and over again.
Doctor, I think on that note, I would like to take a break for this week's Good Life Tips. Stay with us for information to help you make the positive life changes that we talk about on the show. When we return, I'll continue my discussion with Dr. Raj. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Our guest today is Dr. Rajiv Juneja, author of the book, You're More Than That, A Guide to Embracing the Spiritual Being Within and Becoming Fully Human. Doctor, before break, we were starting to talk about addictive behaviors and some of the possible triggers. How do we identify and get past some of these roadblocks that keep us from having the life that we want?
Right. Well, so there's two questions. One is, how do I first identify that this is a problem for me, right? And the way we do that is the following. I'll give you an example. So when I leave the house in the morning, I have a certain way I like to check the door. Now, it takes me, let's say 5 seconds. Not a big deal. Now, if it took me 45 minutes, now it's getting in the way of my life, right? Mm-hmm. So when something starts presenting a roadblock, so when, say, if somebody's feeling depressed and now it's actually causing problems in me functioning, wanting to get out of bed or wanting to go to work, or say if somebody's drinking and now I have a hangover in the morning, oh my God, I can't get to work today. So when it starts interrupting our function, in our social lives, in our work lives, in our love or relationship lives, that's when we need to think, okay, what's something, this is starting to get in the way now, and I need to do something about that.
Doctor, what do you think makes one person able to achieve recovery and lasting change, and others struggle most of their lives trying to make change?
I tell you, a lot of people in the addiction world, and I'm talking about people that are actively addicted or dependent on substances, number one, they think it's too late. It's too late. I've ruined my life. And and the analogy I frequently use with this is, think of a garden. In traditional Chinese medicine, there's an idea called life cultivation. And when I heard that, I said, it's kind of like having a garden. And at the end of our life, we're all going to look back over our shoulder and say, how did my garden do? Did I put some flowers in? Did I do some vegetables? Did I make a little patio to sit there? Or maybe I ignored it for a few years. And, we've all driven by that house that has like the 4 or 5 feet of grass growing outside, right? And I remind people, listen, yes, it's going to take more work to go clean that up, but it's not too late. So one of the fundamental things is that people think it's too late. And it's not too late. I have people that were really lost in addiction for decades, 20 years, and now the person I'm thinking of has her own house, she has a job. In fact, she owns her own business, is really doing quite wonderfully well. But, it was not an easy road. So it's not an overnight answer, that's for sure. But that garden, once we clean it up, is going to give us a harvest. And next year, it'll be even better. And every year, we can continue to build on it. So the fundamental message I'm saying is, it's not too late.
And I think that's an important message because it relates to everyone in their life. I mean, I hear so often from people, I'm 50 and, I never did what I wanted to do and now it's just too late. And it's almost like they sit back and wait to die. So, you're talking about it in regard to addiction, but I think what you're saying, that message can apply to every one of us in any aspect of our life.
Well, that's right. That's absolutely right. You're absolutely correct when you say, there are people that they get to that, it's too late. I'm 50 years old. I'm stuck in this job. But, there's a book, and it talks about the 5 regrets of the dying. It's a very nice book. I can't think of the author's name, but one of the top 5 regrets this author wrote about was that a person, living really their life for someone else's desires and wants, things that maybe their family wanted for them, or maybe that their spouse wanted for them, but not really something that they wanted for themselves. And absolutely true. It's not too late. We had a few people in my med school class that were in their 50s and said, listen, I always wanted to be a doctor. I said, that's wonderful.
Doctor, outside of the fact that sometimes we think it's too late, why else do you think we limit ourselves and don't achieve our full potential?
Well, there's the psychological piece. I think fundamentally, again, there's this fundamental belief that parallels what we were just talking about, that I can't do that. I'm not smart enough. I'm not able to do that.
Those voices.
And so fundamentally, it comes down to our beliefs. Now, I do want to also say, of course, we cannot skip over biology. In these, heart addictions, clearly there's research that shows us the brain changes, how we experience reward changes, and these things, once we become dependent on a substance, it can be very, very difficult to stop that cycle, especially in those first 90 days, and that's why many will have difficulty getting out of that starting gate because the brain has changed. And so fundamentally, there's the biological part. Psychologically, there are these self-limiting beliefs, and then spiritually, many of these people feel spiritually empty or deflated because they've been out of touch with their connection. They've been out of touch with their purpose. They feel that they are actually, like you said, if you think it's, one is 50 and then if that person believes it's too late, well, that surely doesn't support feeling passionate about life.
Right.
And they start feeling flatter and flatter. Well, here we go. One thing that surely might help, boom, a substance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Initially elevates dopamine levels. That's the chemical in the brain that makes us feel good. But, of course, not sustainable. I call it a false high, because as soon as the substance is gone, the feel-good state is gone.
And that's anything that you use to addict. Whatever makes you feel good for a moment, it feels good in the very beginning, but then after a while it loses its luster.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So really reconnecting with our self-worth within us and really understanding that we have been worthy the whole time. Actually, a nice example that people really get with that is if you think of a child. We look at a 2, 3, 4-year-old child, we say, is that child worthy? And almost every adult I've ever asked that question say, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I say, well, what's the difference between that child and you? Fundamentally, nothing. You're older, but otherwise we are the same manifestation of God consciousness.
The book is You're More Than That, A Guide to Embracing the Spiritual Being Within and Becoming Fully Human by Dr. Rajiv Juneja. Doctor, if our listeners would like more information about you and your work, where can they go?
They can go to my website, which is thedrraj, THEDRRAJ.com.
And as always, our listeners can visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on our site, listen to past shows as podcasts, read the digital magazine, sign up for our mailing list, take part in the book club, and be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Doctor, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Your message is so important. We self-limit, we are our own worst enemy, and I think that just telling us that we are more than that, it's just something that we really need to hold on to and bring into our life every day. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. And I love the name of your show. It was wonderful. That's exactly what it is. It's about changing our attitude, changing our self-limiting beliefs, and changing our life.
This is Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.